In this video, I'm going to provide a short overview for the workshop activity in AsULearn. And while I think this is a powerful and useful tool for peer review in AsULearn integrated with the gradebook, it's also not the most intuitive tool. And I think that at the conclusion of this video, if you still feel like you need a little bit of help setting this up, feel free to submit a support ticket or request a consultation. Get a little help so that you feel comfortable rolling this out to your students. So my first step is to go into the course and enable edit mode. I'm going to then scroll down to the section where I want to include this peer review activity. I'm going to click on add an activity resource, and then under activities, I'm going to select workshop. And in this video, I'll just walk you through each of the steps in setting this up. So on the general workshop name, this is just what it's going to appear. This is how it'll appear to students out on the course page. The description is important because this is the set of directions that the students would see before they go into the submission phase. And since we're on the topic of phases, now would be a good time to mention that the workshop activity works in these phases that really demand students to all be on the same timeline. So I've found that when I've used it, it's worked really well if students are all working kind of in lockstep and everyone is adhering to all the deadlines. If you're used to having a little more flexibility with deadlines with your students, or having students even work kind of at their own pace, this may not be the activity for you. This workshop activity works really well when all students are on that same timeline, and each of those phases, when you throw the switch, all the students are going to move to the next phase. So you really can't have students working at their own pace in different phases. So as I scroll down the grading settings, I think we would encourage the use of comments. And then maybe even more importantly, when you're thinking about grading for this, we would encourage you to set this up in your gradebook to be something that's either unweighted or maybe even low stakes. We found that having this as a high stakes grade kind of changes the dynamic for the peer reviewer and the peer reviewees, and makes students a little uncomfortable when they feel like this peer review activity is having a big impact on their overall grade in the course. So setting this up to either be low stakes or even just an unweighted activity so that they get some feedback seems to be maybe a better way to think about this. Scrolling down the submission settings, this is the next phase, and again, critical for you to, in this box for the instructions, just describe what are the directions, what are the expectations for how you want them to submit an assignment, how you want them to submit it. But you can also shape that with these settings below. The submission type, whether it be online text or file attachment. You can also set for maximum numbers of submission attachments. You can restrict by file type. All of this allows you to kind of determine what you want these submissions from the students to look like. Under assessment settings, this is the next phase and the next set of directions for the students. So here again, you would be describing or outlining what you expect from them when it comes to the assessment. You, of course, will be setting up the assessment sort of form for them. I'll outline that at the end of this video, but this again is where you're providing those directions for students. And then finally, under the feedback, you're determining whether or not you're enabling optional or requiring sort of feedback. I would encourage you to think about making sure that this is part of the peer review process. And then also at the conclusion, having some kind of statement that indicates to the student when they have completed this, so that it just cuts down on the number of questions that you might get if there's something that indicates that, yes, you are done with this, and thank you for your time in completing this activity. Example submissions, you can, especially if you've done these kind of peer review activities in the past. If you have an example of a submission that you want to have students assess, it's always a good idea maybe to have them do a practice round of assessing before they start working on reviewing their peers' work. And then finally, the most important step in this might be that availability from what I mentioned earlier, just the idea that by setting up all of these sort of deadlines for both the submission phase, when students are uploading their work into AsULearn, and then the assessment phase where they're assessing each other's work, setting these deadlines and making sure that students are aware of them really, I think, is perhaps the most important step in setting up this workshop activity. So now that I've got this all set up, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to save and display, and I'm going to talk about these last couple of tabs. All right, so now that I've saved, I'm back at the setup page, and this is kind of, I think, a good visual for what I was talking about with these different phases. So the workshop tool works through the setup phase, which we just completed. Then we go into the submission phase, then the assessment phase. The grading evaluation phase is the opportunity for you to kind of look at the feedback they provided to each other before you release it to students. And then finally, closing the workshop pushes out all of the feedback, the comments, the reviews, so that students can see the feedback on each other's work. I would suggest, again, that you take a look at some of these little check boxes. You'll notice I have some X's over here on the side. That's because I didn't take the time to set up the descriptions and provide the instructions, and this is the activity letting me know that. But then what we're going for are these check marks. So as soon as we have these complete, we'll start seeing checks instead of X's. But each time I move to one of these phases, just notice that it'll confirm that we're moving from one phase to the next. And again, we have to have all students in the course moving from one phase to the next together. So if a student doesn't submit a submission to the phase, when you move it to the assessment phase, they no longer can. And I think that that's how this particular activity works. And again, the importance of keeping everybody kind of buying into the idea of this as being some hard deadlines for this activity to be successful. Finally, if you look up here, we've got the settings page, which we were just on. The assessment form, which I won't go into, is where you can go in and sort of establish how you want students to assess each other, provide some general sort of outlines, or maybe even create some kind of rubric that you're giving them to assess each other. And then the submission allocations. This can be done either automatically through AsULearn, or you can go in and allocate each of the submissions to each other and determine which peers are reviewing which sort of peers in the class. I think that the easiest way to do this is to sort of let AsULearn automatically do this for you. It seems to take a lot less time, but if you have a good reason for doing this manually, this allows you to do so as well. But in a really short video, I think that's how we set up a workshop activity inside of AsULearn.